we have to show that within pork, there's parts, right? We have the loin. It's a very, very lean source. The sirloin, the tenderloin, all of these are lean portions of that carcass that are going to create and give us a very great source of protein for our diet.
Welcome to the Swine Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast, the latest swine nutrition research digested for you. I'm your host, Clayton Chastain, and today we have with us Dr. Drew Cassens, an assistant professor and extension meat specialist at Texas A&M Agrilife. So Drew, before we get started, would you mind giving the audience a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, of course, Clayton. Thank you for the time to talk with the group today. So like Clayton said, I'm an extension meat specialist here at Texas A&M Agrilife. Previously, before holding this position, I got my interest in meat science through my undergraduate degree here at Texas A&M. Stayed on to do a master's degree under Dr. Jeff Sable and Carrie Gehring, and then pursued a Ph.D. at Oklahoma State University, where a lot of my pork research kind of initiated and started. Finished up at Oklahoma State and went and took a teaching position at Tarleton State University, which is a ag university just about an hour west of Fort Worth. Was really heavily involved in the meat science curriculum there at Tarleton State University, as well as the judging coordinator there at Tarleton as well, where I took students across the country and competed in meat judging contests, and then formally have taken this new role here at Texas A&M back in June.
When it comes to raising healthy animals, you need more than the right solutions. You need the right partner who brings decades of industry expertise and a global team to put that knowledge to work for the advancement of your operation. At Phibro Animal Health Corporation, we are proud to work with you as your trusted partner.
Gotcha. So I was looking at some of the work you did for your PhD with how you were looking at different aspects of pork quality regarding factors such as doneness, tenderness, human perception, etc. So would you mind diving into that and kind of telling us a little bit about what it all is that you studied?
Yeah, so kind of the idea behind that project was to really just get an idea as to how we see different types of pork products at retail and also at food service or restaurants. And so we looked at three different types of pork loins. We looked at a traditional, just non-enhanced, normal pork chop. We looked at enhanced style. So that enhancement is looking at increasing the water holding capacity, utilizing some type of water, salt, phosphate interaction to help make that product a little bit more tender and juicy. And then also we see a lot of times, especially at our food service restaurants, those really higher quality pork loins. What I mean by that is a lot of times this pork is going to be slightly more marbled, have a little more of the intramuscular fat, and they're branded that way. And then so it's marketed as being a higher quality product in that perspective. So we wanted to see, what are the ways we can look at packaging. And so we looked at two primary packaging types, that being our traditional PVC overwrap. That's that foam tray with that thin film that you see at retail stores. Then also wanted to look at what's called our CO, or carbon monoxide modified atmospheric packaging, which utilizes that gas to kind of help and maintain that true pink color that we associate with pork. And what we found out with the retail color is that, using that CO modified atmosphere packaging really helped to maintain or elongate that shelf life of that product. So that's going to allow it to kind of sit on the shelf at a retail store a little bit longer. Now, in addition to that, we know that consumers are then going to take that product home and cook it, right? And so we need to figure out what are the consumers' perceptions if we take these products, that normal pork chop, take the enhanced pork chop, and take that higher quality pork chop and cook them at various degrees of doneness. And so traditionally, we saw consumers taking and cooking pork very similar to chicken and poultry. They would take it to 165, a very much higher degree of doneness. However, we know that now we can take and cook pork to a much lower degree. About 145 degrees is the recommended temperature to cook pork, which is similar we see like with beef. And so we wanted to see what were the textural components, what was the sensory components at cooking at various degrees of doneness. It was 63 Celsius, 68 Celsius, and 74, which equates to about 145 degrees Fahrenheit, 155 degrees Fahrenheit, and 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And kind of what we saw with this is that, for those consumers who maybe aren't as willing to cook their product to a lower degree of doneness, they prefer to have that product be a little bit more on the well done side at 165, utilizing an enhanced pork chop. So that enhancement is going to help to prolong and keep that juiciness, not allow that product to dry out during that cooking method. However, if you're able to and willing to cook a pork chop, which I think is the best way to do it, at a lower degree of doneness, right, about that 145, then you're able to utilize a normal pork chop or those high qualities and still maintain a very similar tenderness attributes and juiciness comparatively to our enhanced. And so by doing this, we're kind of creating, different opportunities and options for the consumer to have and eat pork.
Awesome. So based on some of the research that you've done, what kind of advice would you give on how we can educate consumers to eat more pork?
I think it's a great question. We're trying to do a lot of stuff here at Texas A&M Agrilife to help and promote that, because we know pork is a really good lean source of protein. And we understand that protein is a very important part of our everyday diet. And so a couple of things we can do is to highlight the lean pork. I think a lot of times people think about pork, the first thing that comes to mind is bacon, right? And they think about how that product maybe is not as healthy as comparison to maybe like a lean piece of fish or a lean piece of beef, right? We have to show that within pork, there's parts, right? We have the loin. It's a very, very lean source. The sirloin, the tenderloin, all of these are lean portions of that carcass that are going to create and give us a very great source of protein for our diet. In addition to that, we need to showcase that tenderness, we need to showcase the cooking characteristics. We need to show that it's okay to cook pork to 145. You don't have to take it up to 165 and cook it well done like we do with poultry. That it's safe for you to consume at a low degree of doneness. And whenever you do that, you're going to get an overall higher satisfaction. And lastly, I think we can kind of highlight pork is that, it doesn't have to be center of the plate. And what I mean by that is don't think about you have to have a pork chop as the main portion of your meal. Let's think about pork as being an ingredient to other types of foods. Let's think about using, instead of ground beef or ground chicken, let's use ground pork for a taco. Let's use it for spaghetti, wherever it might be. Don't have to think about you always have to use a main pork chop for your meal.
Gotcha. So you've thrown this term out a few times of enhanced pork. So I guess my next question would be, what exactly is this enhanced pork? What goes into creating it? And how does that really impact its tenderness?
So enhancement is essentially just trying to increase that juiciness and tenderness of that product. So a lot of times what we're going to be doing is we're going to be injecting a pork loin or a pork tenderloin or something like that with called a brine. So a brine is going to be a mixture of water and salt traditionally. We might also add a couple other ingredients, one of those being phosphate. And what the main purpose of that phosphate is to really help to increase that water holding capacity so that that muscle can retain more of that moisture. If we can add more moisture to that muscle, that's going to relate to having, when we're cooking that product, it's going to lose less. So it's going to allow it to be a more juicy overall product, no matter what temperature you cook it at, whether that's at 145 or 165, you're still going to have a really juicy and tender product.
So final question I have for you, Drew, is when going into your Ph.D., what exactly made you want to focus on meat quality and looking at certain aspects such as consumer perception like this?
I think my background from Texas A&M kind of helped to spearhead that. We did a lot of consumer panels, understanding why consumers choose the products they do. But I think about, with beef, you have these quality grades, prime, choice, select, standard. And if people know and understand those and associate, a prime quality of beef is going to be a better overall eating satisfaction. There's not that for pork. So is there another opportunity for us as a pork industry to provide a very great eating experience that people are going to know and associate with? And so that's kind of why I wanted to look at the enhanced versus the high quality pork. With the high quality pork that we looked at, can we utilize that, especially the marbling, the intramuscular fat we see in those products? Can those be an indicator to create a more tender and juicy product? And we saw a little bit of that. We did see that if you take, those high quality pork chops and compare them to the traditional, they tended to be a little more tender. They tended to be a little more juicy and compared to normal. But definitely that enhanced product create a consistency across the board, which is, I think, one thing that the pork industry has definitely highlighted on, is by utilizing that system to create a more consistent product across.
Well, I believe that's all the time we have. So thank you again, Drew, for coming on the show and sharing all your expertise with us.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yep. And to everyone else, thank you for listening to the Swine Nutrition Blackbelt Podcast. Please visit us at swinenutritionblackbelt.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channel so you won't miss out on the next episode. See you next week.